Alrighty. Hello, internet and friends, mostly friends, but perhaps internet as well. Welcome to the podcast. That is with a K. I am your host, Christian Mishka, and here with me we have co host Steven Laczko.
Hello.
We are going to be talking about some very, very real things, and then some very not real things.
Well, we're
Um,
going to try and keep it as real as
it'll
possible. Let
be,
me let me put it that way.
yeah, it'll be real. Just real. Okay. So I guess we're gonna start with the real, and then we'll get to the other real. Um,
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So yeah, for the first real talk, we're gonna talk about education in school. Um, yeah. So kind of the first question is, Stephen, what is your experience with school? Like, what have you done in the past? What are you doing right now? Do you have ideas about the future?
Yeah. So I have a not an uncommon story, but something a subsection of the population will relate to, which is that I was homeschooled. And for me, I was homeschooled throughout all of high school. Well, like all of my life up until college. I did go to a few co-ops, but
Hmm.
and after that, I was at college. I'm in college now.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Shall I get into some specifics?
Sure. What was it like? Like, what was your view of college before you went versus after?
That's a good question. It's funny actually.
Mm-hmm.
In my, I had an intensive writing course that I did it for a couple years, and that teacher was training me like crazy to be ready for college. She was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Your professors aren't going to be so lenient." I went like she had me. She made sure all of my sentences didn't start with the same part of speech. That I had quality adjectives, quality verbs, short sentences, breaking stuff up. It was like intensive analysis of each of my papers. And then I go to college and I got 110% my first English class without even trying. And I don't necessarily attribute it to that class, though I learned a lot. Like the standards are so much lower than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
At least in certain aspects, college is not as hard as I thought it would be coming into it. That's for sure.
I had a very similar experience, and I was homeschooled as well. Um, so was that one of your classes that, like, what was that class in homeschool? Like, what did that class look like?
It was online,
Mm-hmm.
and we joined up for class, and we had reading assignments, and it went through different stages of history. So it was like a history and a writing course,
Okay.
um, mainly that. And so we had readings assigned, and then we had like grammar assignments and then papers due.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that
Was
was
it
probably one of my most intense classes.
was that
But
with other homeschoolers, or was that like an online class for like a community college, or what was that set up?
so actually, it was at some point it was an online class, and at another point I was doing it through a co-op.
Okay.
So I went to Classical Conversations co-op in this area, and they did in IEW. It's what's called Institute for Excellence in Writing, and so I had kind of the same writing education throughout all of like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Where I did IEW in Classical Conversations, and then I left and I just did it online with the teacher online.
Okay. Gotcha. What did
And I'll
some?
say, like, it was an excellent education.
Mhm.
Like, not hating on homeschool. I'll hate on homeschool in different aspects though. Don't worry.
Sure. So I guess what did your other classes look like? Like, how much did your parents do? How much did you do through co-op? How much did you feel like you had to learn by yourself?
Well, there were different stages. When I was younger, like less than like younger than 10 or 9, I didn't go to a co-op. I went to 4-H.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Is that a co-op? I don't even remember. Is that
I
considered a co-op?
I don't think it's technically a co-op. It's like an
Okay.
extracurricular, right?
Yeah, it wasn't really an educational thing. So I mostly did things at home. So math books, they all suck. Uh, I, you know, basically a lot of books, going through books. That was a lot of my education when I was younger,
Hmm.
and it wasn't structured. Unfortunately, this is a common thing in my story growing up. My schooling was just not structured at all. At all. My mom would kind of give me my assignment or whatever, or sometimes I barely even knew what assignment I was doing really, um, and I would just kind of do it on my own time, and there was no like routine throughout the day. It was just kind of do it, and she would kind of keep hounding on me all day to get it done.
Hmm.
So that was schooling up till like I was 9 or 10, and then classical conversations came into the picture, and then it was a little bit more structured. It was more rigorous because we had to memorize a ton of stuff in that. Um, I actually liked it. It was pretty nice. Um, and then later on, I did more online classes older when I was in high school, and that was similar, but I was more on my own at that point,
Hmm.
just dealing with it on my own. Though my mom continued to kind of keep pushing me whenever I got distracted. And then college came along, and that's a completely different story.
Sure. So what did the transition from that kind of more unorganized doing school to college, which has a lot more structure to at least deadlines and timings? What did that feel like?
It was honestly more of a relief
Hmm.
than anything, which is kind of interesting to hear myself say, actually.
Hmm.
Um, it was unstructured before college, and that was tough. Like, I didn't really know how to not do school in that way. Like that was the only way I knew to. I didn't know really how to be structured in my work or how to time manage. And going a couple years into college, I still didn't really know. Um, I had tried different ways of managing my workload, um, but I don't think I really like cemented my idea of time management until this semester actually.
Hmm.
But there were definite differences when I got into college. It was all on me. My it was completely my responsibility. I gave nothing to my parents. I didn't want their assistance. I wanted all the responsibility. I
Hmm.
wanted to take it into my own hands, and I could do it. I knew I could do it, and I did it. Luckily for a while, I didn't need that extensive of time management skills. Um, but I think over time, I just learned that okay, I need to start writing these things down. Okay, I need to write a little more information about each thing. Okay, here's a better app for doing this. I'll switch to this. I feel like I switched time management apps like every single semester.
Hmm.
Yeah. Did you do that too?
Yeah, or just restructured within the same app, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That too, for sure.
Yeah, cool. Um, I guess so you kind of went from doing classical conversations and learning things on your own through books and um, that to college, which has different professors for different classes. Um, what was your experience going from learning from yourself and learning in a classroom environment and like the differences between different professors? How did you experience those dynamics? What did you think about those?
Sure. Um, I, I, I hate learning from books. I don't like to read a textbook. I'm I can deal with it, but it's not easy.
Hmm.
I prefer like hands-on kind of learning math. I like math because I can do a math problem instead of just reading about it all day. Um, Going into a classroom, not for the first time, but going into college classrooms with different professors, it wasn't that uncomfortable. I think what helped that was that I went to a community college, Howard Community College first, and
Hmm.
I dual enrolled there. And everyone there seemed to have a very similar sort of disposition. A lot of them were homeschoolers.
Mm-hmm.
and they were just very chill. They were, comfortable with meeting new people. Now that I've gotten to UMBC, it's definitely a different culture at Howard Community College versus UMBC.
Sure.
So that helped my transition. I felt like I was at home, like I was around a bunch of people who also kind of was just getting used to what it was like being in college. And so going into those classes, I felt pretty comfortable, pretty at home, and I liked my teachers. I got really lucky with teachers, and that helped a lot. Um, and it was flat out better learning from a person than a book, as
Mm-hmm.
long as they weren't too slow. Uh, then it was good.
Sure.
So I just say flat out better.
And
Sure.
since okay, so you said you go to UMBC, which I go as well, and you're in the computer science track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why did you choose computer science?
That is a good question. That's an interesting, bit of an interesting question. Why do new college students pick their majors? I think there's good reasons and bad reasons. I think my reasons weren't the best reasons.
Okay.
Not that I regret what I picked. I'm I'm not totally sure if there's anything I should have picked like
Mm-hmm.
as an alternative. But when I was younger, I was on the computer all the time, and I got very, very, very comfortable with computers. Grew up on them, and I just had a natural interest in, like, I wanted to make a game. I wanted to make something real that I enjoyed. That was fun, cool. And so I messed around with a little bit of programming, like, basic and just little tiny bits of things. And then I went into a robotics team, uh, and I programmed for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seemed from quite early on, my parents were talking about, like, yeah, computer science is good money. Yeah, this is great. This is a good field. Awesome. This is so cool. And it's like we never really had a discussion about what major I was going to do or what I was going to do with my life. It felt kind of assumed based
Mm-hmm.
on what what I'd kind of picked an interest in, that I would go into it as a career. So that's kind of where it came from. And that's also why I don't think it was the best reason, because it
Sure.
was something I was interested in as a kid, and I always had somewhat of an interest in it. But there definitely needs to be serious discussions about decisions like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a life-changing decision, and you spend so much time and money in it. I'm going to ask one more question that's kind of directed towards you, and then I was thinking we could explore a couple questions together, kind of about education and school in general.
Sounds
Um,
good.
so I guess the question is like, what is one of the most important things you've learned from like your education experience,
Hmm.
or
Interesting.
like alternatively, like what recommendation from your experience would you give to someone who's approaching college? Like those are kind of like the two questions I would give you.
Hmm. Okay, so what have I learned, and what advice
Hmm.
I think is most important? Interesting. So what have I learned? A lot. I've definitely kind of grown up in a lot of ways and learned to deal with responsibilities and not be scared of them,
Hmm.
and, like, continue to have a life. It's like it's okay. You can continue to have a life. You can do things you like despite having responsibilities. That's a okay. Uh, let's see. Well, okay. So things I learned from education, or things I learned while I was a student
Not like the
doing
things you've learned
things.
in the classes you took, but like what did you learn? I guess kind of not directly related to the things you were being taught, right? Like what did you learn adjacent to it that was just
Yeah.
important?
Time management. Learning how to handle assignments and, like, plan my daily routine and life
Hmm.
was huge. And that basically happened this semester. Uh, and it's a huge relief, actually. Like, once you can figure out what you need to do, plan it, and get it done as you've written it down,
Hmm.
more or less, you have, like, power there. you have power. And so like moving into the workforce or kind of anything you want to do, you have like this power, this ability to get something done.
Mm-hmm.
You have a buff, you have an advantage against people who don't have something like that. It makes life easier. So I highly recommend finding time management that works for you. I also recommend a routine. I always just had this strong hate, hatred towards at least like the word routine.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very boomery. Sorry, and it just felt like stale. But it's so it's different. I don't even want to call it routine, but it's just like having something that you do every day in the morning. It like builds up this mental like strength almost. Like you have this morning set of
It's a
things you do that it's like I'm getting this done, I'm feeding myself, I'm getting the coffee I want, I'm doing this in the morning, I'm doing that, and I'm setting up my day
mm-hmm.
so that these things are out of the way. I'm happy that I've gotten those things out of the way. I'm happy I've eaten, had a good breakfast, had a good coffee, and I can get started on whatever I need to. It kind of bolsters your mental. It kind of bolsters your perspective. That's like the best way I can describe it.
It's like a
It's like,
foundation.
yeah,
Like,
it gives you like a mental strength
mm-hmm.
to keep going. That's also part of just like waking up early and at a regular time, but routine definitely helps.
Yeah. Maybe you could call it regularity instead of routine.
Regularity, that's a good word for it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because that's pretty much it. I think that's what having some regularity in your day definitely helps.
Yeah. Particularly in the morning. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
For
That
sure.
seems helpful at least for me. Cool. All right. So now for the questions that we will answer. Um, the first one is kind of a big question, maybe a bit more philosophical, but what is the purpose of school?
Mm.
It's something that takes up a lot of our lives, 12 years plus, especially like even more for people who want to go into like positions that are, like doctor degrees and that kind of stuff, or in the medical field. So what is the purpose of school? What are your
Mm.
initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts are that there are different perspectives on this. And one perspective we can think about is the school's perspective,
Mm,
and the other perspective is like the student's perspective.
sure.
I think that's a good thing to tackle
Do you
first.
think that society could be an additional perspective, like kind of as a whole?
Society in general, yeah, I think so. Maybe like in an abstract sense,
Hmm.
like in that society wants effective workers,
Sure.
effective people.
Hmm.
So which one should we tackle first? Do you think?
Well, I mean, you're posing it in like in fact that you have a school and you have a student, and I guess you're kind of saying that the school is an organization, but does I guess I asked the question, what is the purpose of school? But maybe I should ask, what is the purpose of education? Because school is an organization that is supposed to, or we would expect to distribute, I guess, education to people.
Mm-hmm.
So if we, like, do we need the unit of a school to begin with? What is the purpose of
Mm.
education first, I guess?
Purpose of education. Let me
Hmm.
see.
So I think
Interesting.
I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I believe like the word to educate, has to do with knowledge and acquiring information. It sounds like you're typing.
Yeah, I mean Google gives great
It does.
etymology.
I can just, you know.
So to lead out, it comes from the
Oh
verb let
yes,
out,
that's right. That's right. That's right.
which is fascinating. To lead out.
Right, kind of like bring out potential. I
Ah,
think.
that's fascinating.
Yes.
So we took bringing out potential and we kind of gave it a certain connotation, which is that you need training of some sort in order to bring out. your full potential.
Yeah, and kind of looking at that from a historical perspective, that seems to come from like the industrialization era, where you know, at least our concept as it relates to schools, churning out individuals who are do, who meet certain standards, right, for grades. And back then it would have been like for factory work, making sure that they're getting all of the the things that they're working on in the factories up to speed and up to quality.
Yeah.
It's kind of taking that same kind of idea and applying it to other areas or other disciplines. Um,
hmm hmm
so,
That's true.
hmm
And what comes to mind actually is uh, academia,
hmm
and where that term came from, because our initial concept, I believe, of like an academy came from what, like Aristotle?
yeah, I
Was
think
it
that's right.
Plato? Plato?
Plato's Academy. I think it was Plato. Yeah.
hmm Well, my cat has a
Yep.
fur ball.
Sounds
Apologies.
about right. Plato's Academy. Find it on Wikipedia.
Good.
The origin of
Uh,
words there too.
so, and in this academy, of course, they taught people to think.
hmm
They gave them critical reasoning skills, and they had arguments and discussions. They were trying to find truth, and in a very like not concrete way, I guess, but in a very fundamental way. They were
hmm
trying to find truth about reality, and they were arguing it passionately. At least that's how it's depicted in like paintings and
Yeah.
writings. And so somehow we got to schools from that.
Sure.
Um, what do you think the differences are between that sort of idealistic ancient academy and like our education today?
Sure. That's interesting. So I think, I mean, there's a couple things that come to mind. Like society is very different in those two contexts. Like there's almost 8 billion people in the world nowadays. Back then there were much less, and the things that we worry about are very different as well. So the purpose that these academies serve back then and now are different, right? Like now, it's the purpose seems to be like to prepare. I We might assume to prepare people for the workplace so that they can contribute in society. We can debate on whether or not that's actually happening. And then back then, it seems like it almost seems like fulfilling something within the individual. It's not necessarily to
Mm-hmm.
serve the society. Like what's the word? I just learned something in sociology recently. It was like mechanism versus organism, where like nowadays we're more organic, where we kind of we have the leisure to focus on kind of one thing. Like I'm learning computer science, I don't need to worry about farming and this kind of stuff. That can be
Mm-hmm.
somebody else, that can be delegated to somebody else. But 100 years ago, when people had to diversify themselves, and they were working on many different things and aspects and supporting their lives. So kind of, yeah, I guess kind of there's that aspect of um, specialization versus not. So the purpose of the academia doesn't seem to be um, specializing. Like it's this more
Mm-hmm.
general truth, and it doesn't seem to
Interesting.
be
Yeah.
like setting people up for life in society. It seems to be more like something that someone chose to do because they are interested in it
Mm-hmm.
back then.
So it's like we've moved away from the idea of like the academy and
hmm
more. It's almost like trades.
Yeah, except now I would argue that trades are different from our traditional school because trades directly give you skills on the job and teach you to do the things in those trades, and then you're ready. You're
Yeah.
100% ready to do those things. Whereas I think a lot of people would say what they learned in college is not what they actually do on the job.
Yeah.
Unless you're like in the medical field where it's like that's exactly what you're doing. And I don't know if that counts as a trade necessarily. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that so there's almost like a third distinction there. And that kind of brings us to the point of school as a means to get like a token or a reward, right? Like you have a
Mm-hmm.
diploma, and now because that's recognized by companies, that's kind of it's a key to get you in the door, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's not in that sense. It's dividing it from a trade, which is like on the skill learning. It's it's making that distinction at least,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is interesting, and I don't like it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, if we talk about the purpose of a school, a cynic might say that the purpose of school is to get you a degree so that employers will even take a second look at you.
Hmm.
You know, and I think there's definitely some truth to that statement. It seems to me, so we have three kind of ideas or models of education that we're talking about, which is
Hmm.
the ancient version, there's trades, and there's modern universities.
Yep.
uh, and I think they all focus on different things. I think modern universities in particular, it almost seems like they train you less for on the job work like a trade would, and more for academia.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like training you, well, kind of a focus of the academia world is like your professors are teaching you to be professors, kind of a thing,
mm-hmm,
right? Like, oh,
mm-hmm.
now you're going
Right.
on the track to get a PhD, so now you can be back in the system, um, teaching the people, doing what your professors were doing,
Mm-hmm.
or contributing to research.
Right. Right. And that's interesting because that's not how they're portrayed
Hmm.
ever, and that's not how they're treated either. They're treated like, excuse me, like, here's your badge. Now you're allowed to apply to jobs.
Or now you're going to be the first on the list, first on the
Right.
stack.
Or you're not going to be the
Yeah.
last. That's really what it is.
Yeah, you're not going to be at the bottom of the pile
I mean,
because
they
you just have a
see,
high school diploma.
yeah, they see you're missing a degree or any college experience, they throw you out. And it's like, interesting.
Hmm.
So I think that there's a reason for this, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's, you do get experience
Yes. Hmm.
doing stuff at college. You do have some training. That's not doesn't mean it's necessarily accurate to what actually happens in a job, but you have training with your some tools.
Hmm.
Not even all tools, but some tools. So there's a reason that they put the bar there. But I think the more I think about it, the more it feels like the output of universities and what the workforce wants, what employers want, doesn't match up. Doesn't seem
100%.
like they match up.
Yeah, it's like some overlap, but not
Yeah,
all.
it's like universities want to create professors, employers want effective workers, and they're just in this like unhappy marriage
Hmm.
where they're like trying to stuff students from here into the workforce, and it's kind of awkward.
Sure.
Because how many people talk about you need an internship, as many internships as you can, you need a lot of experience. It's like, why am I paying you thousands of dollars, and in a lot of cases tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
and you're not going to give me experience?
Hmm.
Sorry, I'm getting a little angry.
No, it's okay. No, no, no. You're making good points. It's like there's definitely a misalignment in the requirements or expectations of school and of work. And, you know, businesses want effective workers and they want people that can work well in teams and can contribute to their mission, their purpose. And their purpose is individual to their organization. Whereas schools' purpose is maybe more aligned to creating uh, creating pupils who can become professors, kind of a thing.
Mm,
So it's like you're paying an organization in expectation of getting experience for jobs here, but you're being trained to being trained in regards to the purpose of this unit, not necessarily that unit. Now, I have had some professors who really care about these units, and
yeah.
they're like, "Hey, we're going to do some assignments. We're going to work on resume building. We're going to work on, other things like, oh, you're going to build a website. This isn't a website class, but you're going to build one because it's going to help show off what you've learned in this class." And
Nice.
granted, universities do have, clubs and organizations that focus on the workforce, and they do have some facilities that can, help with finding jobs and they even have resources for that. It's just not necessarily a core part of the full aspects of like the full spectrum of the university or the education. It's kind of like this unit on the side. It's like, oh, we'll check that box
Yeah,
instead of like saturating it.
I would describe it as to it's not structured and designed specifically to make you the best possible candidate you can be for a job. It's just not structured that way. And so here's the thing: there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The problem, I think, is that the expectation is that you go to a university.
That's
And
also
so
true.
so here's what happens: you're young, you're like 10, you're like 15, and everyone says you need to go to college, and hopefully you can, in this modern age, and you get told this is what you need to have a job. And unfortunately, it's kind of true. And so you go, and now you're being trained, for the most part, to be a professor. You're being trained to get a master's degree, and then you're being trained to get a PhD, if you go that route. But if you stop at bachelor's degree, now you're trained in all this book knowledge and the French language, good stuff, and I don't know, geometry, whatever, I don't know, all this stuff that you will very likely not use in the future. So you have this mindset and this skill set that isn't linked to the real world and the real workforce, and yet you're told to go there, and then you go to jobs, and if you don't go out literally outside of the education system, extracurriculars, internships, you are not prepared. You go to school to be prepared, and you're not prepared. It almost seems, this is what I was thinking. Sorry, I'll stop in just a second. It almost seems like, okay, this is from the perspective of a computer science student, of course. It's just going to be different for a lot of different majors and studies. But it almost seems like college should not be your first priority. What should be your first priority is experience. Talking with people who are doing the thing you want to do and working with them and making friends with those people. Explaining that you are interested, that maybe you're passionate about it. And once you have those kind of relationships and you start actually doing it, like, just do it. That's more important than learning Spanish. Unless you want to learn Spanish, that's fine. But from a perspective of a computer science student, it's a lot more valuable. And then, if you have that experience, and let's just be honest, if you know the right people, you can get a job.
Yep.
Even without college, and a lot of my friends have. So you could even get quote unquote internships. You could get real world job experience. And from then, you're valuable. You have the experience. You're valuable already. You don't even necessarily need to go to college. You don't need a degree. The way out of this is, if you need a degree, you could always go to an online university for like 2 years and get a flimsy bachelor's degree from one of them. And so you can plop that on your resume.
True.
And then you're probably more prepared than a lot of people coming out of the university.
Yeah. All right.
And that's my... Sorry, I'm finishing my thought. That is the point. The fact that makes so much sense, and the fact that is pretty reasonable, is ridiculous, because it's never stated. The purpose of universities is never put out plainly. And so that's what I really think the problem is: misinformation and wrong expectations.
Yeah, true. So, what did we learn about the purpose of school? What should the purpose of school be?
That's interesting. What should the purpose of school be?
Should it be like that ancient model? Should it be like the trade model?
I think it depends. That's the thing.
Is it nice to have the diversity? Should there be more diversity?
That's the thing. It depends on what you want to do. Because let's say you want to be a professor. Then there you go. You go to university. You go through it.
Yeah.
But if you want to be someone who can do their job really well, and you want to just throw a bunch of cash at an organization and have the experience you need, then you go to a trade, really. right? And so what I really think needs to happen is we have to be honest about what our education systems do and what their focus is. And we have to generate the education systems that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like what people like us want in the computer science world is a computer science like trade. We want to just learn how to do it and then do it.
Yeah.
It'd be cheaper, probably. It'd probably take less time. Learning to program, honestly, a lot easier than going through all of school.
And you can do it all on the internet if you wanted to.
That's true. That's true. A lot cheaper.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, purpose of it's not that we need to identify the purpose of our educational systems necessarily, though it's important. That is important.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the important thing is to identify what educational systems we want, because I don't think that's been talked about.
Yeah. And then I guess to kind of like weight that with the reality of society and like um, how there is kind of just recognizing that there is there is the difference between having a diploma and not in the job hunt, and if you can make those personal connections, that's going to be very important. But just keep that in mind that those personal connections are going to be even more important if you don't pursue like a diploma, just because of how society is currently structured.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I guess like one of the benefits, probably one of the biggest benefits to how schooling structure like is structured, or trade maybe more specifically, is you have a mentor, you have somebody who you can go to who's on the job, who knows what they're doing, and they can teach you directly. And in a trade, that ratio is more 1 to 1. In school, that ratio is like 1 to 50, 1 to 20, between that, or maybe 100 depending on what classes you are. Of course, as you get to like 400 level classes, it narrows down.
So you're
Um,
saying this is the ratio of just like sitting in class learning from a professor versus on the job stuff.
I'm saying the ratio between the person who has the knowledge and the people who don't. So
Ah,
in trade, it's closer to 1 to 1. It's like you and them, right? You're learning from them. Might be a small team. But
I see.
in the education system, it's like you and 50 other people, and then there's one person up there telling you how to do, telling you about this, whatever you're learning. And, there's some sort of diffusion going on there. You can't distribute knowledge efficiently to all the differences of the people involved. So that's kind of another aspect. Like there's a benefit and an efficiency to having more people, being able to train more people, right? But there's a downgrade in your output because they're all going to learn differently. If they all learn the same, then it would work.
That's true.
But they all learn differently.
Yeah, that,
So
that is a whole nother issue
it
on
is.
learning styles
Yep.
and how you learning how you learn best.
Yeah. All right. I think we've kind of explored this question enough.
Seems good.
Thank you
Can
for
I?
contributing. What?
Thank you. It looks like your camera is
It
blinking.
is blinking. I have no idea what's going on there. I will.
Oh,
Oh, I don't know
it's
why it
about
does
right.
that.
It's a
Cool.
lot brighter. But it's good.
I don't.
All right.
It's software. I blame software.
Yeah.
Blame
Agreed.
the programmers.
Stupid software
Oh my
developers.
gosh.
Jeez. What a pain.
They're calling themselves stupid. All right. Now we come to the time where it's blinking again.
It is blinking.
Stop
Isn't
it.
that what you want?
I'm
Though?
gonna sit back. Here we go.
All right.
We have finished the real talk. We shall now go to the late night sock talk. What are we doing, Steven?
So we have a very a controversial subject, perhaps, but a very important one, and one that has been on the hearts of a lot of people this past year in 2020. It's been very difficult, and so we're talking about miraculous sidewalk findings. And I know you've had experiences with these, and I have too, and it's deeply impacted the way I view love and relationships and the way I go about my city. And I don't know. I'd like to hear um, how it impacted you first.
Hmm.
But maybe we can give a very brief description. of Miraculous Crosswalks. Can you give a very brief description, just high level? Most people know about
Sure,
this.
sure. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows about miraculous crosswalks, sidewalks, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I mean, just in the moment that you least expect it, a crosswalk, a sidewalk, it depends on where you are, just appears in front of you or behind you. You don't even know. It just appears around you in such a matter that it helps you to do exactly what you didn't know you needed to do. Um, so, for example, I was walking down the street the other day, and this crosswalk appeared, in my left plane of view. I didn't know it was there, and I looked over to it, and I saw it. I was like, "What is this crosswalk doing?" So I just followed it. I just stopped exactly what I was doing, started following it, because that's what you do in these situations. You do not question the crosswalk. You just follow
Mm.
it, and
Amen.
it took me um, exactly where I didn't want to go, but I
Mm.
but I needed it, right? Like absolutely needed to go there, um,
I know
and there,
exactly what you mean.
yeah, and that's where I found these.
Really?
Yes.
Seriously?
They keep
Okay.
coming.
I didn't actually tell you this before we started this podcast, but I have a very similar experience.
Oh yeah.
More similar than I thought, actually. Yeah. Again, it was in the peripheral of my. It was in the periphery of my vision. Walking down the street late at night. It's often late at night, is what I hear. And I was walking along a dirt path.
Hmm.
Right? It's like, okay, there aren't any sidewalks or crosswalks on at least on this dirt path. Definitely no crosswalks. I suddenly I feel like an itch, or like it's just like in my mind, and I look over and it's there. It's just there suddenly. I walked
Hmm.
past that area, no crosswalk. I look, crosswalk. And again, I was just thinking to myself, why would there be a crosswalk here? Like there's no traffic lights. It's not even a very commonly used road. But I just knew somewhere deep down in my heart that I needed to take this road. I needed to take this path. I went across, and I just continued going straight because there wasn't any obvious path, but I knew that this was the right direction to go. And you know what I found?
What?
You know what I found, Christian? I found these,
Oh my goodness.
and they're great. They're great quality, and I would have paid an arm and leg for these, perhaps a spleen.
Hmm.
But I went on that path, and I found what I didn't know I needed. I actually love that wording of yours. You found
Hmm.
something you didn't know you needed. And that's exactly what so many of these stories have in common.
I
Is
know.
that people find what they need in these visitings. Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think they are? You know,
Hmm.
it's hard to say.
Yeah. I guess it's not a sighting, because that would be like Bigfoot
Because
visitings.
you're stepping
Appearances.
on these. You know,
You
you're
are.
within 2 feet,
Yeah. They're
depending on
very
if you're
real.
measuring from your center of mass and how tall you are. You're maybe 2 or 3 feet away, as opposed to Bigfoot, who's usually many feet away.
Yeah. I gotta say, these crossings are appearing everywhere. I think you can just Google the internet and you'll find about 4,000 occurrences of crossings in the last day,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
just crazy. Like people are
That.
are finding the things that they didn't know they needed, um, and it's just miraculous. Like
Hmm.
you can't even describe it.
That's
Like,
insane. You know what's so interesting to me is you might have heard earlier. I said sidewalks, miraculous sidewalks,
hmm.
and that's actually something I wanted to bring up, which is that I recently discovered that there's been miraculous sidewalk crossings,
Oh.
sightings or experiences, I guess, happening now. As of late, this is like within the past 4 days.
Hmm.
I've counted by hand over 400 sightings in the past couple of days of sidewalk crossings. They didn't exist before now.
It's crazy.
There, there's not even ancient writings about this stuff. About sidewalk crossings, some, but I'm sorry, crosswalk crossings, miraculous crosswalks, some, but nothing about miraculous sidewalks. And that's what's this is like my new obsession now.
Hmm.
I gotta say.
You know what's crazy? I went back to the same spot the day after, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to see if I was going crazy, and it wasn't there. So I
Mm-hmm.
was very confused. Like it must have just disappeared at some point when I was there and walking. I don't even remember what happened after I picked them up. I was just back in my room. Like,
Oh,
can't even explain that. Um, there's got to be something more going on here. Like, this hasn't been happening for a while. It just started happening. People are getting the things that they need that they didn't know.
mhm.
And I didn't remember anything that happened after walking down the path, which just makes me wonder what happens if you don't walk down the path.
That's what's fascinating about these, because you might not even think it's miraculous. You might think, "Oh, I didn't see it before," and you would just walk away.
Mm-hmm.
What happens? Does every person who walks away not get the thing that they didn't know they needed?
Where does it go? Because the thing
Where
is
does it go?
there if the crosswalk is there, right? What if
You would think.
I don't know if there's been any sightings, crossings, experiences where two people have been there. It's always been by
Hmm.
yourself. So can the other person see it? Is it like one of those can you hear the sound of a tree falling in the woods thing? Like is it
Right.
only an experience that one person can have?
That's a good point. It's true. Every sighting that I've come across, it's only one person. And I've actually seen some photo evidence of these crosswalks, and they appear to show up on camera.
Hmm.
But that's the thing. So do apparitions. So do ghosts. And
Hmm.
so, does that prove that these are physical things? Are they spiritual? Are they? Are they? Perhaps they materialize from the ether. I don't have the answers, but these are the kind of things that we want to talk about on the late night sock talk. Things that are close to a lot of people's hearts.
Hmm.
And so I pray that all of you um, will accept that miraculous crosswalk that you may see in life. You may not, but hey, these sightings, I believe in them. I believe they're real. I've experienced one. Christians experienced one. It'll change your life. I'll tell you that much.
Change mine.
Well, uh, we have one more segment
We do.
tonight.
The last segment is what's your world? Where we ask the question, what is your world? Um, so I guess I'll ask
Yeah.
you first, Stephen. What is your world?
Well, here's the thing. My world is purely made out of a two-dimensional substance
Oh,
known as phtherite.
ferrite.
It's phtherite, but with a P, and it is not silent. It looks somewhat like origami, but everything is made out of fractals. And so every
2D
tree,
origami
every
fractals.
surface, every surface actually has an infinite surface area.
Okay.
So you see a tree in the distance, and it's going up, and it has all its branches. But if you look really closely, there's an infinite amount of detail, like wiggled, you know, along these paths up this tree and up pointing towards the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And in this world, the only colors are red and yellow. Not a great combination, I gotta say. Not my favorite combination, but I mean, I don't make the rules.
Right.
So the trees are red, the ground is yellow, and up in the sky, maybe there's a third color, maybe it's not. It's actually gray,
Mm.
and there aren't any stars. There aren't any clouds. There is no sun. They're all flat colors. And what I'm curious about, what I have not figured out yet, is whether there are stars, whether or not there's space up there. So there appears to be a planet.
Mm.
There doesn't appear to be a solar system. But
Interesting.
that's what I don't know. Since there's no shading, I don't know if this is like an edge, if this is like a cube, or anything like that.
You can't see that
So,
far.
so soon enough, there will be a space agency developed in this world, and we will take to the gray.
Take to the gray.
We'll take to the gray.
Explore the gray. And then maybe it's a distance thing, right? Like when you get closer to the gray, you start seeing the yellow and the red. So it's just like a haze.
Oh yeah. So like you go further out, oh, it's just a haze, and then you start seeing little blips of yellow
Yes.
out there, like stars, except these are more planets.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not spheres. These planets. What shape are they, Christian?
I think they are dodecahedrons.
Dodecahedrons,
Yes.
the 20-sided dice.
Yes.
They are dodecahedrons, and there's one tree on each of the middle of each face. They're all different shapes. Every single one is unique. Um, if you were to roll these, the number of branches actually gives you a number between 1 and 20.
Hmm.
So they are actually feasible for use. They are
Okay.
functional for any kind of god the size of many, many planets who happens to take one of these and throw it.
Interesting. I'm still wondering what a dodecahedron would look like in 2 dimensions. It boggles my mind.
Uh, uh, well, you see, that's the thing. Everything is made of a two-dimensional substance, but it's in a
Hmm.
3D world.
Okay. Okay.
So it's almost like origami.
So, oh, right. Okay. It folds.
Yes,
The
exactly.
universe folds.
Yes. So like every branch, like everything is made of. It's almost like made of polygons,
Mm-hmm.
but like very, very minute. And since it's a fractal shape, everything, then it has an infinite surface area, and you can never actually see just like flat. It doesn't look like paper when you get up close. It's actually very tiny bits of detail on every surface.
Mm-hmm.
So we can keep flying out into the gray and slowly have things kind of fade into existence, almost like render distance. Uh, and way out there in the gray, far beyond many planets, you start to see one more color, and that's pink.
I knew it.
And here's the thing, it looks like it's just a blank, flat plane of pink. What it actually is, what you're actually seeing, is one polygon on the belly of a humongous entity. And this entity has 2 arms, one head, and 3 legs.
Wow. Is this the
We,
only entity?
uh, yes, this is the only entity in this world,
Wow.
at least that can be accessed by mere three-dimensional beings.
Hmm.
We call it the GM. We call it the
Oh.
Godman,
Yes.
and he likes to grab planets and just throw them around the place. And it's truly horrifying because we don't know when he'll get to our planet. And when he throws it, I mean, we're goners.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a terrifying situation to be in. And that's my world.
Wow. What a world. I love it.
Thanks. So what's your world, Christian? I'm very curious.
Wow. Well, I think my world exists on a video game controller.
Mm,
That's the entire world. It's a video game controller. Nothing else in the universe exists except for one video game controller. And the people who live in this controller don't know it's a controller because that's all they know. They call it like et or something.
et.
That's their word for it. Yeah, it's et. And et turns colors when enough weight is put on certain segments of it. So there's actually like a religious ceremony when these people, well, I'm gonna call them people, but um, they're more like little creatures, but they will gather around a giant cylindrical surface that has a letter on it, and they will stand on top of it, hoping that it will press down, but they're not heavy enough to do that. And I said there's nothing else in this world, but there's actually a magical thing that happens sometimes out of nowhere. A giant fleshy object comes down out of the air and pushes onto this cylindrical surface, and it goes down into the ground of Et and changes color. And the beings here um, are waiting for this occurrence to happen, and they actually hop onto that fleshy object. And some of them leave, and some of them stay, and they will always ponder what happens to the ones that leave. They
Mm,
don't know. They don't know. They believe that it's the right thing to do, to go up there, with whatever. I guess they call it Fing. Okay, so we've got Et and we've got Fing, and these beings just live for that moment. And the thing is, they don't know there's multiple cylindrical objects on Et. There's also some other objects that are there as well, but they don't know when it's going to happen or which cylindrical object to go. So it's all about gambling. So this society gambles like mad. They are putting in their money, whatever their currency is, into a pot, thinking that this is going to be the next occurrence. And if they're right, then they get their money. So you've kind of got this divide in sanctions. You've got those who are just trying to go up to the Fing, and then you've got those that are trying to gather all of the material goods on Et, kind of taking advantage of the people who are going up to the Fing. So that I think, yeah, that's the world of Et.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I like that. My only question
Hmm.
is, what is their currency? That is the most important question that
That
came
is the
to
most
my mind.
important currency. So their currency is their own excrements.
Hmm.
They can produce them themselves, but
Hmm.
collecting them is important.
Hmm. Is collecting them the valuable part of the process? Like, is that the difficult part? Is
Uh,
there some? Is their excrement perhaps like heavier than any one of them combined?
um, Heavier than any one of them combined. I don't know about that.
Like, what makes it valuable to them is my question.
Right.
What makes it so incredibly valuable?
I think what makes it valuable is their excrements kind of disappear after a period of time, so they have an expiration date. So having an abundance of those in a given period of time shows that you have power because you've collected them. You can
Mm-hmm.
harness them. Otherwise, they just go free.
Mm-hmm.
And
See,
I believe the scientists of ET are working on ways to extend the length of time that these exist.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Are they living creatures?
yeah, they're living creatures. They look like different shapes and sizes. Some of them have legs, some of them have other shapes that aren't legs, just kind
Mm-hmm.
of squiggle about.
Spore creatures.
Yeah, kind of like spore creatures. Yeah.
I would love to visit sometime. That's fascinating.
Yeah, you'll just have to. I think external people aren't allowed to visit unless the Fing brings them. The Fing will
Mm.
occasionally bring beings, um, but they're not usually the same beings who existed on Ed. They're usually
Mm-hmm.
from somewhere else.
Has there ever been etlings that have returned from
I
thing?
think there's a story of one Etling that has returned, and this story is kind of propagated all of time. But what's more interesting is actually some stories of non-Etlings coming to Et and telling everyone that, trying to convince everyone that going to the Fing is the wrong thing to do. So there's kind of this conflict in beliefs there.
So you're like a rival religion.
Yeah, yeah. They're which was really unfortunate for those few non-etlings that came down because they were immediately turned into currency. You can
Mm.
imagine how that happened.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
I mean, it is what it is.
It is. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next late night self talk.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about poor. I think his name was not to be said.
Mm. Well,
We can
or
think
not to be
about it.
said.
Yeah,
Let's remember not to be said.
beautiful.
Excellent.
And that is my world.
That's a great world. That was entertaining.
Great. And that brings us to the end of the first episode of the podcast. Podcast with a K.
Woo! That was
Awesome.
fun.
That was
It's great.
fun. I must stop the recording.